Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hello, everyone, wherever you are, whatever your time zone, welcome. This is AI Talk, and I am your host, Kevin Crane. Welcome to the show. Today, we will be discussing the topic of scaling AI tools into your key processes, a topic that's rapidly moving from an interesting experiment to a core strategic imperative for many modern organizations. As we know, adoption of AI has skyrocketed, with 88% of organizations now reporting regular use of AI in at least one business function. But many are still struggling to scale that experimentation into enterprise-wide impact and real value. Only about a third of companies have begun to scale AI programs across their organizations in ways that materially affect performance and outcomes. That gap, the gap between use and true integration, is really where the competitive advantage lies today. So in today's session, we will explore how to bridge that gap, how to move beyond just pilots and embed AI into our core business processes and extract measurable value that lasts. We've got a great panel of guests, and we're going to dive in here in just a second. But first, I want to say thank you to everyone attending today, and that includes the folks that are joining us live on LinkedIn. Hello, everyone. And hello, everyone joining us today on Zoom. Thank you. During today's discussion, look, I'd like to hear from you too, so I'd like to encourage everyone attending today to participate. So please join in with your comments in the chat section. If you have a question along the way, just jump on in. I will attempt to get some of your questions and comments into the flow of the show today, and we'll have a few minutes perhaps at the end for your questions. All right, with all of that said, let's jump right on in and introduce our panel of guests, starting today with Alicia Herman, Head of Solutions, Business Applications at Amazon Web Services. Alicia, are you with us?
I am. Thank you for having me today.
Hello, Alicia. It's great to have you today. Where are you calling in from?
Cincinnati, Ohio, in the United
Cincinnati,
States.
Ohio. Well, welcome, Alicia. It is great to have you with us. Thank you so much.
Thank
Also
you.
joining us today is Raj Bhowmik, Senior Machine Learning Engineer at Cognizant. Raj, are you with us?
Hey, Kevin. Yes, I am. How are you?
Hello, Raj. I am good, and it's great to have you with us today. Where are you calling in from?
I'm from Dublin, California.
Wonderful. Awesome. It's great to have you with us. Thank you, Raj. And also joining us today is Ishwari Pawar, Associate Director of Educational Analytics and Student Success at Southern Methodist University. Ashwari, welcome aboard. Where are you calling in from today?
Yeah, thank you, Kevin, for having me. I'm from Dallas, Texas.
Dallas, Texas. All right. Well, very good. Well, Alicia, Raj, Ashwari, it is great to have you with us. I'd like to start our discussion today by pointing our attention to an article published recently by TechTarget. The article outlines 13 steps for successfully implementing AI in a business and a number of important factors to consider. I won't cover them all here, but in the end, the article warns that successful AI adoption comes down to really three things: aligning AI to real business goals, having the data and systems to support it, and scaling carefully while managing change and measuring value. I'm wondering what everyone thinks about this article. Alicia, what are your thoughts on the article? Does it cover the ground that is needed, or is it missing something important that we should also consider?
I do think it covers the ground. I will say I think this article could apply to every bit of technology that's out there, not just AI. I do feel as though AI does expose or extrapolate the current challenges that we have implementing IT in our organization, and AI just brings that to light much faster because we're trying to do more with it at all times. I personally would like to highlight the human side. Oftentimes we are implementing technology and going through change management, but we haven't really established all the groundwork with training and upskilling and everything that's needed to integrate AI into our daily work processes.
Indeed, it emphasizes training and things like selecting vendors. Raj, what are your thoughts on the article, and what are some of the factors that you think we should be considering in our strategies as we move forward implementing AI across the enterprise?
Yeah, so I think there were some good points made by Alicia. But yeah, one of the key highlights of that article was, the performance consistency, which we often see, right, in our all AI use cases that the model tends to hallucinate. It tends to give poor results as it progresses, right? So one of the key highlights that, the article, measures is the performance consistency, which should be the key focus, according to me.
Strong pipelines, integration with existing systems, these kinds of things are critical, of course. Ashwari, what are your thoughts on the article, and where do you think we're headed here in the next 12 months or so with AI adoption?
Yeah. So when I read the paper, what struck me most wasn't any single step, and it was how familiar the story felt. So article like plays out all 13 steps, and obviously everything makes sense, good data, clear use cases, pilots, governance, everything. And but what I have seen in practice is that most people don't fail because they have missed any one step in middle of that, but they fail because they underestimate how much discipline it takes to move from experimenting AI to more of operationalizing AI. And paper talks about lot of data quality, integration, and model choices, and those are important. But the hardest part shows up between the lines. And as I said, prioritization and ownership, those are the things that determine whether AI becomes a part of our daily decision making or it's just another pilot that never quite scales.
A lot to consider: data quality, operational, the human part of it. The article is from Tech Target. Folks, I'd like to know what you think about the article, and does it resonate with you? Is it something that, what is your experience at your place of work? The link to the article is here in the chat feature. It is from Tech Target. It outlines 13 steps for successfully implementing AI in a business. Let us know what you think. All right. Well, folks, we have a lot of ground to cover, so I'd like to jump into our main discussion today, starting with our first discussion point, and that is aligning AI projects with your business needs for long-term value. Look, research shows that only about 5% of companies are really realizing meaningful value from their AI efforts, while the majority struggle to connect pilots to measurable outcomes, often without a clear strategic alignment. Alicia, from your perspective, what do you see across AWS customers, and where do organizations most often misalign AI initiatives with real business needs, and how should leaders correct that?
Yes, I believe there's often a disconnect between the business problems and those trying to implement AI technology. So in my mind, I would like to establish kind of a leadership framework for strategy, for gathering input from all levels of the organization, and then utilizing that input. I'm not saying everybody has to submit, this is what I want to change in my day, but everybody has an avenue or a process that they can submit something for a business change, and then have the company use a strategic framework to decide what does then become a candidate for exploring, a candidate for a pilot, a candidate for true implementation. So really understanding what are the business problems that we're solving, understanding where we are in terms of our foundational readiness for the projects. And the article had some great insights on data fluency and other foundational things that we need to implement AI. But so really taking what are the business problems, what can we practically solve given our, foundation for implementing AI solutions, and then what is the highest priority for our company. So really running that through a stringent process and making, the highest priority get the most attention. There may be some, roadblocks. Yes, this is our highest priority, but we don't have, that foundation in place. Our data isn't ready for that. So we might start here, or our users aren't ready for that. We have to do some training. So we'll start here, but really coming up with a practical roadmap for how we'll go about implementation. So I'm starting to see our customers do that. I think at the beginning of AI, say maybe 18 to 24 months ago, everyone was just experimenting, I'll call doing science projects, which is great, starting to understand how LLMs work, what happens when you use multiple models, how do those intersect, what do agents do, how can we use them? But now it's really getting to the how do we practically implement this in a way that boosts productivity or reduces error or improves customer experience.
Mm-hmm. From your experience working with customers, you're head of solutions and business applications with Amazon Web Services. What signals do you see that tell you that an AI project is actually positioned for long-term value versus just another stalled experiment?
So, obviously, we could look at something like service usage, right? How much are we using of those models and when? And most companies, if we're utilizing a corporate-wide, no product, that we can monitor that to see who's adapting, who's using, and we'll start to see changes within the organization, small ones. So we need to again establish that strategy, leadership strategy, where we can give feedback up and down to say, so and so adopted this or is trying this now when we hadn't asked them to do that yet. Or I've have an employee that is able to now use QuickSuite and offer other analyst insights to different teams when they're coming to meetings, and really being able to share the results that way. So I would say it's hearing word of mouth, understanding where the usage and adoption is going, looking for those champions within the organization. So we're starting to see all of those signs within our customers to show more of a long-term use than just an experiment.
Now, Raj, you are an engineer at Cognizant. From an engineering perspective, how important is business clarity before model development begins, and what breaks down when that clarity is missing?
So actually, business clarity is the most important thing because, it should not be like that we have an AI team and what can we build, right? That is a common failure mode, right? So a better starting point is like, okay, this is a business decision and this workflow is currently expensive and inconsistent. How can we make it better, right? So business, the clarity in what we want to build and is AI is necessary in building it is one of the is one of the key point. Like every use case doesn't need AI, right? Sometimes with normal rules and analytics, we can solve a very huge problem, right? So like having the clarity that okay, we have the good data, is the data good, like if in this process, right, if we can, like accuracy should not be the always the goal. Like I have seen many use cases failing because they give accuracy the highest preference, that okay, it should be very accurate and all, but sometimes it comes with a very trade-off, right? We lose in the latency, right? So basically, like we have to question the business that what is the error rate that you are going to live with? What it like if the model or if the AI use case, gives some wrong result, who is accountable? So clarity in all these points, right? In every decision helps really get into where we want it to be.
Analysts tell us often that the misalignment is really at the core of not realizing proper ROI and benefit from digital transformation and AI adoption. How do you translate high-level business goals into technical requirements that teams can actually build against?
So basically, let me give an example, right? Let's say like we build a churn model, right? So how many, users or customers are going to leave us, right? Build a model. But instead of building that model, we have to, we have to build such, use case that before it happens, how can we retain them, right? How can we do the retention so that the customer doesn't leave at all, right? So that I think that should be our goal, right? It should be like the revenue lift or any KPIs that helps us in this process.
Now, Ashwar, you're with Southern Methodist University. An interesting perspective for this discussion. In higher education, how do you ensure AI initiatives are aligned with institutional outcomes like student success rather than just operational efficiency?
Yeah, well, in general, in my experience, the biggest determinant of whether an AI project creates a long-term value or not is whether it starts with a real decision the organization wants to improve. And too often we see that AI begins as a technical experience rather than a business one. And the question really is, what decision will it change? Who will act on it? And basically, how will we know it worked or not? And like you said, I'm from educational background. I work at a university, and the main long-term value here can be, it might be improving student retention or course progression. Whereas in business, it could be, as Raj mentioned, it could be reducing churn or improving forecast. But the principle is same at both the ends, and AI should be embedded into workflows, but tied to measurable outcomes. And bottom line is, if it doesn't change the behavior, it doesn't create a value.
I'm a big believer in the adage, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So I'm curious, Ashwari, how do you folks at SMU measure whether an AI initiative is likely to or is delivering real ROI and value?
Yeah, and now this is true for most of the universities. When we talk about AI in educational institutions, the challenge is very similar to what we see in business, but the stakes are a little bit different. Here, AI isn't about efficiency or revenue, it's more about student success,
Hmm.
equity, and trust. And the most effective uses of AI in education start with a clear question like, how can this help a student persist, succeed, or be better supported, without replacing a human judgment? So that part is very important.
Before I move on, I want to explore this idea of measuring a little bit. Raj, I believe that one of the big gaps that caused this gap that we're talking about is this really inability to measure and link ROI to business objectives. How do you advise your clients, and what is your advice for measuring the value of an AI initiative in ways that really matter?
So, yeah, so it depends on, like stakeholders to stakeholders. So let's say like there is a new company, right? And they are in the service providing, it's a service providing platform. They have all their, pickers, delivery guys, right? So sometimes you use AI not to just, improve the revenue or, or anything like revenue lift or anything. Sometimes it can be to improve the service quality, right? Let's say there is a brand new company who wants to integrate AI into this kind of delivery system which they have. Sometimes as a company you don't know that if the delivery guy or the delivery person is behaving courteously or in a well mannered way with their customers. When they do not do that, that makes a bad impression on the company, not the person who is in the delivery person, right? So you can use an AI, integrate AI to measure the chat or anything, right? So basically, all the delivery person will chat with the customers when picking, sort of like that. So measuring the sentiments, right? It creates a value that you can train the delivery people, the pickers, to behave based on how they speak with their customers. Sometimes one worded reply, or talking in sarcasm or anything, like we as a human tend to talk in many emotions, right? So sometimes the ROI is not only revenue but growing your customer base. So
Mhm.
this is one such example where based AI can tell you that, okay, this conversation between this delivery person, the customer is not satisfied, the, there was no courteousness in this, because nowadays LLMs are capable of detecting this human emotions. So that helps in training your own pickers to behave in a way, like we have seen this in real world, that when the satisfaction of a customer grew significantly, like we measured it, like it was 80% or 75%, and it grew to 98%, where there was a particular course designed for them to take before they start their delivery journey, so that the interaction between them is quite smooth. So yeah.
Alicia, how do you measure whether an AI initiative is likely to deliver sustainable ROI?
Yeah, so I'll try to use a tangible example here. So, we had a customer that was an insurance agent. They do underwriting, and they came to us and said, it takes too long for our underwriting process. We want to change it. But when we really dove into that, it was looking at, okay, it takes this much information to get complete data from a broker. Then it takes this much time to get data from third-party systems. Then it takes this much time to analyze, and then it takes this much time to disseminate, the information, collate, and then actually communicate what's going on there. So in that amount of time, they were not being competitive against other companies that could deliver, quotes back in, fewer days. So really we're looking at a problem of lost revenue, but also I will say data readiness for the underwriting part of the quote. So really one is to break down what the actual problem is and then how the technology can solve it a little bit more granularly than saying, hey, this is taking too long, right? So that's kind of step one. And then for each of those, it's to identify then what are the outcomes that we want. Is it higher customer win rate because we're able to compete in fewer days? Is it the time that it takes to provide a quote? The reducage in days from 14 to say 4 maybe. And how are our teams, our underwriters interacting? Are the brokers happy because we can turn this around so they give us more quotes? So really looking at, the tertiary, I'll say, outcomes of what we're implementing and really trying to benchmark those from what we're doing now. How many days does it take? How many are we winning out of the percentage of bids that we're getting? And then how satisfied are our brokers? Benchmarking all of that and then doing this again in a few months to see what are the tangible results from that. And that could be, like satisfaction scores, that could be actual days, that could be revenue that's coming in, but really honing in on that impact with the customer to say, these are the outcomes that we want out of this project, but doing that in the beginning.
We are here. This is AI Talk, and we're here with Alicia Herman from Amazon Web Services, Raj Bhowmik from Cognizant, and Aishwarya Pawar from Southern Methodist University. We're talking about scaling AI tools into your key processes. If you have a question or a comment for our panel, please just pop on into the chat feature, and we will attempt to get some of your comments and questions into the flow of the show. And folks, indeed, we have a question or a comment coming in here now from William. William, thank you for your contribution today. William says sentiment detection is important in call centers, particularly in coaching new hires. The system can sense frustration on the call, and a call supervisor can help. It helps with several KPIs, also improves employee retention and reduces turnover in the call center. Folks, I'd like to ask your thoughts on this comment about sentiment detection. I'm not an expert on sentiment detection and how it works. Alicia, what are your thoughts?
So I think this is very, very important. So we do at Amazon Web Services, we do have our own call center service called Connect, and I do work in that. It is one of the features that is very helpful in the life cycle of a call center, and also retaining and reducing or increasing repeat buyers. So it is very important to be able to understand the sentiment both from the call center employee, but also from the caller that's calling in, and see how those escalate and de-escalate and understand what works, what words were said, how things can be changed to help feed into the model to do suggestions while the caller's on the phone. That could be, just simple phrases that can help de-escalate the system. That could also be, or the scenario, it could also be, rebates or options for the caller calling in. But really having that sentiment feedback on there can help drive customer satisfaction, can increase it, and then, reduce buying patterns. But implementing that technology is pretty vital in that to understand the interactions as well as keep employees.
All right, very good. Well, William, thank you for your contribution today. And folks, I'd like to move us on now to our next section of our discussion. That's really focusing more on the technology now, transforming experimental models into reliable systems. Despite widespread experimentation, as I mentioned, only a small fraction of organizations have the mature infrastructure and processes really needed to scale models into dependable systems. Alicia, what are some of the biggest technical and operational hurdles that you see when companies try to move from pilot to production?
I'm going to say data all day, every time.
Okay.
I'd like to akin it to, I mean, I'm not sure what age everyone is on calling in, so this may or may not be relevant at this time, but I kind of think about the data transition. Everybody used to get file folders, and say when you got your automobile payment due or your insurance payment due, you would take that, you would pay your bill, and then you would file it, something like that, right? But along the way, you don't use some providers. So maybe you take the top of the file folder that says, insurance provider A, and you just flip it around or leave it there, and you've already switched providers. So it's really not insurance A anymore. Insurance B is hanging out in the file, but you know that because you did it, but nobody else knows that. That would come in from the outside or externally. So data kind of rules everything. And the more companies have been acquired, the more that they use different types of technology, the harder it is for all of the data to get in sync. And it does take that expert of those that are using that data to help align it to the goals that we're trying to achieve. So data to me is the largest factor in the foundation. But there are more, layers in the foundation of that, just the infrastructure of your company overall, what stack they're using for AI models. That could be everything from servers to, how you're recalling the files that are coming in. There's a whole bunch of factors that go into the infrastructure that's set up, but really data and data fluency drives most of the outcomes that I've seen from our customers.
Now, Raj, from your experience, what usually breaks down when experimental models and pilots are pushed into production too quickly?
So actually, like I would agree with Isha again. So it's the data. So I have seen people saying that it works on my data set, but when in production, the data is really messy. So there can be, n number of factors that data comes in different format. At the end of the day, we want to make life easier for the model. Like the model should get a very clean, easy data because it helps them to break down, give a very good result. Because at the end of the day, we should, a model when it is trained and built, the data sets are curated and it's trained on tokens. So in real world, when it's pushed too quickly, we should be very careful about the data. That is what we can say, that is the god of anything, right? And it's not actually the model quality, right? It should be the governance, right? Sometimes what happens, companies, you get stuck in a loop, right? If they don't know like how many AI calls are being made. I have read instances where they have created agents for a simple task, and that has incurred around thousands of dollars, which shouldn't be. So the governance, the guardrails, right? Your data shouldn't leak, right? The guardrails are pretty important, right? It should not, you cannot give PII data or any confidential data, right? So these are some of the things, right? And also I have seen a simple task being run for long hours, which if you run even on CPU, it will not take much time. So as Elisha mentioned, like, the servers, if it's a GPU task or a CPU task, like all this should be analyzed before you push it into production.
And Ashwari, how does the transition from experimentation into reality look different in an academic or institutional setting compared to enterprise environments?
Yeah. So I agree what Alicia and Raj mentioned about data quality. But at the same time, I see a lot of teams get stuck in experimentation phase. Like building a model isn't actually a hard part anymore. That's relatively easy. But the hard part is turning that model into something that people can trust and use every day. And model by itself isn't a solution, as we know. It's just one piece of a bigger system. And as Alicia mentioned, it's not just about accuracy alone, and reliability comes from stable data inputs. That's very important. But at the same time, we need to have a plan for what we do when the model is wrong. And talking about educational sector, so in education, trust really matters, obviously. Advisors and faculty don't need a black box kind of a system that just says, trust me. They need to understand what system is telling them and feel confident in using it for the students. Now, just to give an example, faculties rely on early alert systems just to flag students who are at risk and not at risk. So they don't just want an alert, they need a clear reasoning behind it. And again, it shouldn't be a black box so that they can trust the system and take meaningful actions accordingly. And honestly, the best AI systems are reliable, a little bit boring, but it should be easily understood.
Now, Alicia, earlier you were emphasizing data as a primary factor in success. How should leaders think differently about data? I mean, we have so much data. It's
Right.
everywhere. How should we really think differently about data and scalability when it comes to AI adoption and transforming from experimentation into production?
Yes, I believe that it's a um, I believe that it's hard to get funding for something that's not glamorous. When you ask for funding to do some data overhauling, that's just, it's not very glamorous and it's a harder sell. I think that my advice would be to come up with the reasoning of why that we need this data, why we have to go through all of these different changes and trainings and labeling and all of that. But as we go through all of these hordes of data, I think there's another way to think about it too, is um, that's monetizable, right? That data is actually monetizable. So when you are asking for investments, there are some ways that you can monetize that data externally, but you can also monetize it internally by saying this data set is valuable for these reasons and really assigning why. Why would I invest in this? And then give the reasons why. While we can unlock customer success, we can unlock, sales opportunities and pipeline. We can move things from leads to launched in faster days. So really trying to assign that. So it seems a little bit more glamorous because in my mind, the data is what is a lot of the most valuable parts. We have so much more data than we need, but it's unlocking what value do each of the data pieces have, and how do we put those puzzle pieces together to make, an ROI.
And Raj, a similar question. What practices or disciplines do you feel leaders should adopt that will make a bigger difference in turning models into systems that can be maintained over time?
So business should, again, like it's kind of a repeating, like it's data again, like data, because without data, you cannot create something really valuable or tangible, right? Every decision that you make, take any domain, retail, finance, hospital, life sciences, everything is data, right? So a business should, take the right data, right? So sometimes we tend to take, subgroups of data from everything to create a particular output or a result, right? What we think we should need, but that just creates more noise, right? And the business, that one thing I should, it should not be always the accuracy, right? And the test, that means accuracy test, should not be the goal always. Like there should be robustness test, right? Like rare edge cases, right? Any drift, if your data is drifting. And the most important that we see is the fairness check, right? If particular subgroup is harmed disproportionately, right? So these are some of the checks that a business should take care of.
Now, Ashwari, before we move on, what lessons from education could actually benefit commercial organizations trying to operationalize AI?
Yeah. So, when we think particularly about data, it helps us ask very basic, simple questions like what kind of data it is, where it is coming from, and what do we want to do with it? And obviously, numbers can show patterns, but what matters specifically in educational sector is words and stories that give context to those numbers. And obviously, we have different kinds of data. When we talk about educational data or students' data, we have behavioral, perceptual, demographic data, and everything tells us different kind of things. But the key is to know the limits and the biases so we can know what actually to trust, when to trust, and what we are actually seeing.
All right, very good. We've talked about alignment, we've talked about data. I'd like to move on to scaling and scaling AI tools in a prioritized, structured approach. But before I do, one more comment here from William I'd like to put out to the group really quickly. William is asking, which is more important, volume of data or relevance of data? Interesting question. Anyone have a comment for William? Everyone?
Uh,
I, oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
actually both.
Yeah, both.
Just talking about student retention, educational perspective, uh, having a good relevant data is important, but as an analyst, as a statistician, I cannot do anything with it, any kind of modeling, if I don't have a volume of data. For example, I need last 5 years of data at least to create a good model. So, answer cannot be either or, it should be both.
Alicia, do you agree? What are your thoughts, Alicia?
Yeah, sorry about that. I believe that relevant data is most important. Um, I will tread with caution on this one, but I do think that you can synthesize volume based on a large enough set. You can synthesize more. So I think relevant data is more important,
Hmm.
just slightly.
And Raj, interesting question. Volume or relevance?
I think it's a balance of both because if I have relevant data, let's say tomorrow I train a model, right? As Ashwari mentioned, like if the data is relevant, but I don't have the volume, the model will not learn, entirely. So I think it's a balance of both.
Hmm.
Like,
I will just add one thing, and this goes along my monetization statement earlier. You can buy many data sets now that can be relevant for what you're trying to solve for. So that's another way. If you have the relevancy, you can add the volume.
All right, very good. Let's move on to our final discussion point today, really structured around a structured approach. Leading organizations prioritize and expand high impact AI solutions at a pace that is measured often 2 or 3 times faster than others, moving from data to execution in months rather than years. Alicia, how should organizations decide which AI use cases to scale first and which ones to pause or just stop altogether?
Yeah, so I touched on this a little bit earlier. I believe the first thing to do is understand where you are in terms of your AI foundation, understanding, from governance, from strategy, and then also from technology. So understand where you are in those three spaces. Are you risk adverse? Do you have your servers set up to where they can handle the volume? Do you have your data ready to be consumed by models or agents? So really have a clear understanding of where you are foundationally, I believe is step one. Also, I would also include in there, where are your employees at right now? And how is your leadership championing this effort initiative? And then really to look at the opportunities then. So how there are infinite opportunities and problems that we need to solve. Not all need to be solved with AI. Not all are a priority. So putting in that kind of work through process of which gain our attention and putting them through that kind of processing and vetting. High volume, low cost. I mean, that's kind of an easy rubric that we've used for technology for a long time. What's high volume, low cost? That can be use a model or technology with to alleviate that from some of our employees or partners. High ROI, low effort, something like that. Just really what rubrics are important to your company, and then running them through what mission statements do we have? Do they align with what we're trying to do as a company? So you have kind of this foundational setup that you're doing at the beginning from a governance structure. How are we doing this? What do we have? What makes sense? That's kind of putting the foundation together with how we're going to measure all these projects or understand their priority, getting all of the projects together to rate them, and then the execution to say, okay, this is what we've come out with. Does this still make sense with our mission as a company and how we're set up? And going through a road mapping process after that.
Alicia, as you're talking, I'm thinking platforms and shared services are one advantage that may be important. What role do you feel platforms and shared services play in enabling a structured and repeatable scaling?
I believe platforms are kind of king in this area, right? Even those that are kind of plug and play in shared services as well. I think we'll start to reevaluate our shared services, right? If you just think about accounts payable and accounts receivable, that financial role, how does our world change a bit as we have all of this AI technology. So I think consumers will start looking for more out of shared service companies and expect more for them to be competitive, and continuing to offer those services. But platforms and shared services play a very large role. You could even think of a shared service as, intelligent document processing. And what information can I get out of that for accounts payable? Who's doing that and acting upon that? And then platforms that are very easy to plug and play. Some platforms are great for ERPs like SAP. Some are great for, other niche solutions for, very specific, we'll say paper manufacturing, something like that. But they're also, they're kind of key roles in there because it alleviates the burden on the company itself that's trying to make these changes and helps them to move faster and accelerate their experimentation to, outcome.
Now, Raj, strategies are great, but execution is where it all comes down to the rubber meets the road, if you will. From an execution standpoint, how should teams sequence AI initiatives without overwhelming engineering and operations?
So the first thing is the value, right? So what value they are getting out of their execution, right? And the second I would rank is the feasibility, right? Like how complex it is and everything. Like then the risk, like what risk they have to, if there is a brand risk to it, if they will lose the customer trust, right? And then the last thing is like, time to impact, right? How fast you can impact. Can you ship it in 6 to 10 weeks, right? Because this execution, if we consider this parameter, I have seen that, we can ship things faster. Like if we have this, the risk, feasibility, everything is, we have, written it out in front of us. Like it helps us in like enrichment when we do the execution that I've seen.
And Ishwari, we've been talking about execution, but it's not just about the initial execution. It's about continuous process improvement over time. From your perspective, what are your recommendations? I mean, what metrics and feedback loops can really help determine whether scaling efforts are actually delivering value over time?
So, when we talk about scaling AI, I don't think it's about building more and more models. It's really more about being intentional and where AI actually adds value. So, it is more about prioritization, and not every process needs AI, and not every good idea should be scaled at the same time. So, I usually think in terms of impact, readiness, and basically adoption, and high impact use cases with good data. And if we see a clear ownership of everything, it should come first. And others may need some more foundational work before we scale it. So, talking or giving an example about educational sector, uh, here especially restraint matters, and scaling too quickly without governance or clarity can create confusion, and in some cases actually erode trust. So, for example, when it comes to scaling AI in education, restraint matters. And as I mentioned previously, not every process needs automation. So the focus should be more on high impact areas, like talking about university, like earlier alerts, course progression, resource allocation. So if these are scaled thoughtfully with transparency and governance, uh, but obviously keeping human oversight, or yeah, human presence at the center. So that's my take on it.
All right, very good. We are here today. This is AI Talk. We're here today with Alicia Herman, Head of Solutions and Business Applications at Amazon Web Services, also Raj Bhowmik, Senior Machine Learning Engineer at Cognizant, and Ashwari Pawar, Associate Director of Educational Analytics and Student Success at Southern Methodist University. And folks, where has our time gone? We could talk for another hour and still not cover the ground. But before I let you go, we have reached the action item round of the program. I'm wondering if each of you could please provide us with one quick action item that our viewers can use to take advantage of the ideas and advice today. Ashwari, do you have an action item for us?
Yes. So, as I mentioned previously, a lot of AI initiatives start with a lot of excitement, but some of them end with pilot that never quite goes anywhere. And we don't really have an AI problem. We have a prioritization problem. And most organizations can build models, as I mentioned, but very few know how to turn these systems into those systems that people can trust and actually use. So the real challenge, as per me, is aligning AI to business outcomes and making it reliable enough for everyday decisions and scaling it in a way that at the end creates value rather than making that whole system more complex.
That is Ashwari Pawar from Southern Methodist University. Ashwari, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank
Now,
you for having
Raj, do
me.
you have an action item for us?
Yeah, I would like to say use a lot of AI. It's fun, but at the same time, I would caution restraint. So uh, I generally say everyone who uses AI that how the AI is built in the back end. It's complicated, but it's a lot of fun. Whenever you get some time, try to uncover the model, how everything works, right? How the AI thinks. Learn everything from scratch. That's how I did it. That's how I get to know, like, when a model hallucinates, when I train a model myself, I exactly know, like, how it will behave, right? So that's what I would say. Like, use a lot of AI and try to build one from yourself from scratch.
That is Raj Baumak from Cognizant. Raj, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Kevin.
Now, Alicia, do you have an action item for us?
Yes, my action item is to be curious. So whether that's trying out a new type of AI, whether that's becoming a champion for your business line at work, just be curious and keep learning. The technology is not going away.
That is Alicia Herman from Amazon Web Services. Alicia, Raj, Ashwari, it's been great speaking with you today. Thank you so much for being with us. What a great panel today. Your perspectives and advice were spot on. So thank you so much. And I hope that we'll get a chance to talk again soon. And to everyone joining us today, thank you too. Join us again next time on January 22nd with another great panel of guests. We'll be discussing the retail revolution when tech meets the next gen shopper. That should be another great discussion. In the meantime, if you'd like to find me, you can do so on LinkedIn. I am happy to connect there, so check me out. I'm Kevin Crane, and you can check out my weekly audio podcast, the Digital Transformation Podcast. But for now, that'll do it for this episode of AI Talk. And until next time, I am Kevin Crane saying thanks for watching.